All right, everyone. Um, Today, I'm going to be talking about my proposal. This proposal sits at the crossroads of environmental economics, international business, and public policy. The question we're going to be asking is, do environmental provisions in bilateral trade agreements stimulate renewable energy consumption and green FDI for indirect investments? As you all know, from the 1990s, there was a movement for trade liberalization, which drove economic growth, but it also intensified environmental pressures. Governments began including environmental clauses around the 1990s in trade agreements to address this tension. This research evaluates whether those clauses produce measurable effects on renewable energy adoption and foreign investments. The purpose is to determine whether environmental provisions in the bilateral trade agreements lead to increased renewable energy consumption and FDI inflows. While numerous studies analyze how trade openness and FDI impacts emission, few have isolated the treaty-level mechanism of environmental provisions within bilateral trade agreements. And the central question is whether these provisions have measurable economic effects, specifically whether they increase renewable energy consumption and attract cleaner forms of foreign direct investments. The so what factor? Well, this research will show how trade policy can become climate policy, linking global economics to environmental action. It's going to test whether environmental clauses in trade agreements drive change, not just talk about it, which if as a common thing that many people in the field of sustainability and global policy have been talking about for a long time. It's also going to help countries design smarter treaties that attract green investments and expand renewable energy. It's going to build evidence that economic growth and sustainability can reinforce each other and not compete. It's going to fill a clear research gap between the few studies that connect foreign direct investments, renewable energy in one causal model that I'm going to show later. And it's going to offer data-based roadmap for turning globalization into a tool for climate progress. Now, what are my three main research questions that are going to be answered by three different models? Do environmental provisions increase renewable energy use? Do they attract more foreign direct investments? And are they linked to lower CO2 emissions? My hypothesis is that environmental provisions do lead to an increase in renewable energy use, that they do, in fact, attract more foreign direct investments in cleaner energy, and that they reduce CO2. Those are my three statements of hypothesis for the study. Now, you may ask me, why bilateral trade agreements? Bilateral trade agreements have been selected because they provide the clearest and most consistent framework to measure the effect of environmental provisions on renewable energy and foreign investments. Since the 1990s, the BTAs have served as experimental platforms where countries explicitly negotiated environmental clauses. They produce clean, dyadic data suitable for regression analysis and reflect a real policy choices rather than generalized declarations, which sometimes happens in bigger trade deals. By analyzing BTAs, the study captures where sustainability commitments are first tested in international trade. Because usually what they do is they test out different policy instruments and different regulations in bilateral trade agreements. And then if they are successful, then they go into bigger, broader trade agreements. Now, what is the theoretical framework I'm using to analyze this? The lens of which I am focusing my research rests on four theories and one concept, environmental consonance curve. This is a more macro level. We're going to call it the EKC. And this poses that an economy grows, environmental degradation initially increases due to the industrialization, but after a certain income threshold, societies invest in cleaner technologies and regulations, leading to lower pollution levels. It's going to create bell U-shaped inverted curve. Basically, in the start, we go to a new let's say an emerging market, we increase pollution, but at a certain point, there's an inflection in the curve, and it stabilizes due to good management practices, the investment in better technologies, and then the degradation environment goes down, and so does the CO2. Now, the other theories that I'm using are the pollution haven hypothesis and the pollution halo hypothesis. These are more firm micro level. Firms relocate to countries with weaker environmental regulations, increasing pollution, and the halo hypothesis, where it explains how foreign investors bring cleaner technology and management practices, improving environmental performance, which effects dominates depends on a country's governance and regulatory quality. So we're going to see different interpretations or results depending on the countries that are in the bilateral trade agreements. Another framework that I'm going to be using is institutional theory, and this is going to test out stability and governance. Predictable rule-based governance reduces uncertainty for economic actors. This is what the institutional theory explains. Basically, that strong institutions attract responsible investments and ensure that environmental rules are enforced. We also have the Porter hypothesis, and this one states that regulations foster innovation. The study that Porter did through his hypothesis suggests that stringent environmental regulations can actually drive innovation by forcing firms to adopt more efficient technologies and production methods. These innovations offset compliance costs and improve competitiveness. So in this particular environment, we're under the assumption that these regulations are actually beneficial to the companies in the long term. And finally, we're going to introduce from sustainability the concept of entropy, which comes from the second law of thermodynamics. And applied socially, this concept implies that economic systems left unmanaged will degrade environmental quality, while environmental provisions in trade agreements act as an organizing force that reduces that systemic entropy by embedding sustainability into economic exchange. Now, how do we take all of that into our research and analyze it for a conceptual framework? Well, first we need to talk about the economic transition dynamics. The research assumes that trade liberalization combined with environmental provisions is going to push countries faster along the EKC curve, accelerating the shift from pollution-intense to cleaner production as income grows. In terms of the FDI mechanisms, which is the pollution haven halo, bilateral trade agreements with environmental clauses influence whether foreign investments behave as a haven or a halo. Well-governed BTAs attracts cleaner investment flows. In terms of governance and mediation, we're talking about institutional theory. Environmental provisions act as an institutional commitment that stabilize expectations for firms and investors, thereby creating and enabling environment for renewable energy adoption. Finally, innovation and systemic order. This is why we're using Porter and the entropy concept. Stringent environmental commitments stimulate innovation. That's the Porter effect. It maintains systemic order, low entropy, by embedding sustainability as a structural principle in international trade networks. Now, what are the limitations that I'm having right now in my study? I'm having a little bit of trouble in identifying specific data for green FDI, particularly for what we call clean energy or renewable energy. I might change one or the other depending on what information I can gather. If not, if I cannot find that, I can still use FDI as a proxy. However, I do need to make a differentiation in the model, which I'm going to explain later. What are the key terms that I'm going to be using here? BTA is bilateral trade agreements. Basically, bilateral trade agreements are an agreement between two countries. Let's say is United States and Colombia. They have a bilateral trade agreements as a BTA. It differs from other forms of trade agreements that have more countries or are regional. Environmental provisions are, we're using the Environmental Provisions Index from a source that we have from a university that collects all of the, has a DESTA, called, that has all the data of all the trade agreements. And why we're using that, that's codified already in the data. So it's easy to analyze. We're going to be using percentage total of renewable energy consumption, and finally, foreign direct investment as a percentage of GDP. Now, let's talk about the literature review, what we found in all of the papers that we had to read. So first, let's talk about trade liberalization and the environment, how we connect the two. Research on trade liberalization and the environment shows that trade actually can improve sustainability when supported by strong institutions. Adweiler, Copeland, and Taylor in 2001 found that while trade expansion increases pollution, cleaner technologies and industrial shifts can offset these effects. Bagdadi, Martinez, Sarsoso, and Citona, sorry if I'm mispronouncing their names, in 2013 showed that regional trade agreements with environmental clauses reduce carbon emissions, especially in NAFTA and Euromed countries. Finally, Leal Arcas found that such clauses are becoming more common, but remain weakly enforced. So together, these studies suggest that trade and environmental governance works best when legal commitments are clear and enforceable. This research builds on the idea that by testing whether bilateral trade agreements with environmental provisions drive renewable energy investments and sustainable FDI. Now, in terms of FDI, energy and carbon dynamics, the mechanisms of sustainable investment, why are we including FDI? Well, the research on foreign direct investments, energy and carbon emissions show that investment can either damage or improve the environment, depending on the strength of governance and institutions. The studies by Sarkodie, Shabazz, Goldman-Glue, and Mulugeta found that foreign investments often raise emissions when regulations are weak. Remember that pollution haven effect that we were talking about? But it can lower greenhouse gases and boost renewable energy when paired with strong governance and clean energy policies. So, which creates the pollution halo effect. Renewable energy plays a dual role. It reduces emissions and attracts new sustainable investments. That's one of the things we're going to be analyzing in a model. I'm going to show you that in a diagram later. This evidence supports that examining whether environmental provisions, which we're going to be using as MPROP for the rest of the presentation, when you see that, we're talking about environmental provisions in bilateral trade agreements, can create similar governance effects that direct FDI towards renewable energy and lower carbon emissions. Another thing that we learned in terms of the literature that we did in the review was about renewable energy transitions. This is one of my favorite topics, and the policy drivers of sustainability. Research on renewable energy and policy transitions show how regulation, innovation, and geography shape sustainability outcomes. Cover in 2021 found that Europe's renewable energy systems remain robust under different climate scenarios, though results vary by country, emphasizing the need for resilience in energy planning. MTS in 2021 showed that strict environmental policies and green innovation reduce carbon emissions, supporting the Porter hypothesis that regulation can drive technological progress and competitiveness, while Rosafi demonstrated that renewable adoption in France follows diverse regional paths influenced by industry, policy, and infrastructure. Together, these three reveals how effective renewable transition depends on climate resiliency, policy astringency, and structural diversity factors that shape how trade investment policies, such as environmental provisions in bilateral trade agreements, can promote sustainable energy growth. And finally, the broader policy context and the bridge of all these concepts. Studies on energy policy and sustainability emphasize that strong governance is key to lasting environmental progress. Andrew in 2021 showed that energy diversification improves security in Asian countries. Newman found that equity in Europe's energy transition raises costs but builds public support. And Sobakol warned that technology without governance creates moral risk. So together, the leadership shows that effective policy fairness and accountability must guide climate action. That's why we need environmental provisions on the trade agreements. This research tests whether environmental provisions in bilateral trade agreements can achieve the same goal, linking global trade to renewable energy growth and sustainable investments. Now, let's talk a little bit about the methodology. That we're going to be using a quantitative panel from 1990 to 2020. That's the data we have available. And particularly, we chose 1990 because that's where we started to collect environmental provisions data. The unit, we're going to be using country year. Our independent variable is what's found in DESTA, and it's going to be in the environmental provisions that I told you later before. DESTA is the database, the center that collects all the trade information. The dependent barriers we're going to be using are renewable energy, FDI as a percentage of GDP. We're also going to be adding two control variables, which are going to be GDP per capita and trade openness, and CO2, I'm sorry, three. For the analysis tools, we're going to be using the Microsoft products as they are mandatory for the class. But in future research, if I do decide to publish and we get a good paper, we're gonna be doing this in Stata or Python or another software that's stronger to get better results. Finally, the scope of work is the bilateral trade agreements. We're not using all the trade agreements out there. We're gonna minimize it to bilateral trade agreements between the dates of 1990 through 2020. The data sources, we use DESTA for environmental issues and the dyads, which is very important for the econometric model. World Bank, renewable energy, GDP, trade CO2, UNCTAD for FDI inflows, and CEPI for bilateral distance data. The data cleansing, we're gonna be doing data cleansing, intensive data cleansing, and data management with Excel. That's why I'm using Excel Power Query. It's a much stronger tool. And in some cases, I might use a Power BI as well. It's another Microsoft product. It's for visualization, but it has Power Query embedded in it. And it's helpful to connect the tables and create the relationships. So in here, now we're moving over to our first regression model. And in our first regression model, we're going to be looking at renewable energy consumption as a percentage of total energy use. And this measures the share of renewables. It could be solar, wind, hydro, bioenergy, etc. in a country's total energy mix to capture the level of sustainable energy adoption. Our independent variable in this model is going to be the environmental provisions. This is going to be like the dummy variable. If it has environmental provisions, it's going to have a 1. If it doesn't include them, it's a no. It's going to be a 0. The control variable that we spoke earlier is going to be GDP per capita, constant 2015 US dollars. Another control variable we're going to be using is trade openness. And how we're going to be measuring this is through the sum of exports and imports relative to GDP. This variable controls how integrated the economy is with global trade, which may influence technology, diffusion, and renewable imports. We're using these control tools to make sure that we present an analysis with causality. So we're going to be looking into that later in the presentation, but just for your awareness. So this is the expected sign how we expect these data to behave. For the first model, the dependent variable was renewable energy consumption. And here we expect to be positive. We expect the GDP per capita to be positive. And for trade openness, it could be positive or it could be negative. We are uncertain about that, but we'll see how it behaves. It might be different. For the second model, we're going to be adding the FDI component. So foreign direct investment inflows as a percentage of GDP is going to measure the ratio of incoming cross-border investments relative to the economy size. This gauges how attractive a country is to investors. The independent variable is going to be environmental provisions. We're going to have a mediating variable, which is the renewable energy share, which is going to serve as an intermediating factor. Higher renewable capacity may attract green or responsible investors. We predict countries with growing renewable sectors draw from FDI, especially clean tech related. And as we've done before, we're going to be using GDP per capita as our control variable here. For example, higher income implies stronger infrastructure, lower investment risk, and greater investors' confidence. So we need to take that into account as well. How we expect the science to behave in Model 2 is for the environmental provisions to be positive, for renewable energy to be positive, and GDP per capita to be positive when we're using foreign direct investments. And finally, the third model, in here, we're finally going to be talking about CO2 emissions per capita. And this is going to indicate the country's environmental performance or pollution intensity. And this acts as a robustness check. If environmental provisions truly improve sustainability, emissions should decline. We're going to be using, like I mentioned, environmental provisions, renewable energy share, foreign direct investments, and as I mentioned, a CO2. Now, we expect foreign direct investment could be either way. We expect renewable energy share to be reduced, and we expect negative on the environmental provisions. Now, how do we bridge the gap between correlation and causality? The goal is not to just show a relationship, but if one causes the other. We're going to use data from 1990 to 2020 to track changes before and after countries sign trade agreements with environmental clauses. We're going to compare countries with and without these clauses to see if renewable energy or FDI changed after adoption. The controls for GDP, trade openness, and other factors to isolate the true effects of environmental provisions. And we're going to test the three connected models. Renewable energy leads to FDI, FDI leads to CO2, to trace how the impact happens, not just if it happens. This step-by-step approach helps move the analysis from correlation to causality. And in here we have the framework of a diagram of our causal path for this three conceptual models. The environmental provisions lead to increased renewable energy. We're going to be testing that in the first model as a theoretical framework, looking through the lens of Porter and institutional theory. Then how an increase in renewable energy consumption leads and attracts green FDI. So people see, oh, they are consuming more cleaner energy. Let's invest there because we can get more money. And then we're going to explain the pollution halo hypothesis here. And finally, the third model, we're going to see if it actually is reducing CO2 emissions. And we're using the environmental cost curve as a reference model to explain the results, but we'll see. Like I mentioned before, the data analysis tools are going to be Microsoft Excel mainly. We're going to be using the data analysis toolpack that the professor taught us in class for regression. We're going to be using Power Query for merging, cleaning, transformations. And hopefully the scatter plot, we're going to be using Power BI to visualize and patterns and results and get a much nicer looking graph. This study builds an integrated data sets linking DESTA environmental provisions with global investments and energy indicators. Although renewable sector FDI data are not yet available, for me right now, general FDI remains a strong proxy. I want to make that clear. Now, what it's next? What's happening next? I'm gonna be merging all the data. I already have
George,
almost
you're
all
doing
the
a
data sets.
George, you're doing a fantastic job. You've gone over time, but it's okay because your partner's not here. Um, how many more slides?
Just the ones explaining Carlos' presentation.
Oh, okay. So, okay, finish and then I'll make some comment and then I'll ask the rest for comments. Just hold on to that one then.
All right. Okay.
Okay,
Well, I can do this when he presents.
do the last, yeah, do the last slide.
Perfect. This is the last slide. We're gonna run the Excel regression analysis, interpret the results, and prepare the policy paper and the paper and the policy takeaways, what we learned from all this. And that's my presentation. I hope you guys liked it. And I'm eager to see your comments.
Well, I thought it was very well done. Alexandra agrees. I think the rest agree. Beautifully put together. Lovely. Good start. Um, there's some things missing, but surprisingly, and I see lots of development for your project. So this class is just to get you started, right? With what you've done so far, the framework, and some sort of models, some sort of integration, and what we want to see is like you mentioned that I'm going to force you to use just Excel for now, and then whatever in the future in another course, you can develop it further with panel data analysis or with structural equation models, which I think it's crying for, or causal Granger causality analysis. These things that you guys either some of you have econometrics, some of you don't. So I don't expect heavy econometrics right now, but that is for development, right? This is just to get you going. I'm finding the data, cleaning the data, doing some preliminary um, regressions. So I'm going to leave you to comment a bit, and then I'm going to see if anybody has comments, and then I have to make a few comments of my own. Okay, so anybody want to say anything? No. Felicitarlo, you guys.
Bella, te votaste, George. Super impressed.
Thank you, guys.
Very
Thank you
elegant,
so much.
very complex topic, very elegant. None of us probably are experts in the area, but it looked really good and organized. So that's a start to even understand your topic better. I feel smarter listening to it, right?
Thank
Okay,
you.
my comment is that you missed at the end that what did he miss? Does anybody know what he missed at the end? He was supposed to tell me.
The
Uh,
AI use.
AI use disclosure. I also
yes, I
want you to tell me
mhm.
which journal you would publish and which
Okay.
conference you would present. It shouldn't take you too long. And three expert reviewers. So if you can add those in, I will make this due on Friday so you can add it in and it can be more complete or any other changes you want to make. Um, I'm wondering also if you need more controls. I like how you did such a great job explaining um, that you have to clean this and the dollars that you're going to use are constant or real dollars 2015. If anybody doesn't understand that and you're doing international work, you're going to need to learn that. So maybe I'll talk about that next week too. I'm making a list of things I need to talk about. I really want to know which countries you're going to use, George. I need to know which countries. Are you going to stick with Kyoto countries or G7 countries or G10 countries or because otherwise, then you're going to need other controls, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Right now, I was using all the countries that have um, bilateral trade agreements with environmental provisions. So all those that have uh, environmental provisions, I was going to use them.
Maybe
It's a
use
large group.
maybe use Kyoto countries just because that's one set of rules. But you're saying all bilateral trade agreements, so there's lots of variation there. Anyway, let me know. Let me know what you're planning in the next week for that. It's really pretty important. So you're just going with all the countries with whatever agreements?
Yes, and basically,
To
if they
start.
have environmental provisions, that's like it basically measuring if, having started that policy talks is actually producing results.
Okay. Okay. So I mean, I think it's fine for your draft. If you have maybe, have you assembled the data or you're working on that still?
I'm working on that, yes.
Okay. Okay. So that's like my main concern, the few points I mentioned to add, and then maybe be more explicit. Well, you're using all the countries. So anyway, maybe put a slide about any problems about doing that, challenges about using all the countries, because that might
Yes.
that might require you to do another set of controls. Um,
Okay.
as institutional, right? You're just using GDP, but then
There
institute
are other factors.
there's other
Yes.
factors.
It
Uh,
can get tricky. It can get tricky. Yeah, I know.
yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe you can suggest something, or just at least suggest the problems with that. Let's just make a slide
Okay.
presentation to mention what you think would be a problem with that. All right. Fantastico.
Perfect.
I will let George
Thank you,
go.
Professor.
And then next week, we're going to have Carlos at the start and George comments to follow. But fix that up and keep me posted. And I'm sorry I didn't respond to at least one or two emails you sent me. I don't know. I think I didn't get it. But just write me again or we'll meet this week, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I'll stay in line, but I'll be hearing.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Andrew and Christopher, we have next. Whoever wants can go first.
That
Sure,
Andrew.
I'm gonna go ahead and go first. All right, let me share my screen here. Can you see my screen?
Sì, se ve.
Okay, all right. Well, we're gonna take a journey into agricultural economics, the intersection of agricultural economics and international development. My study is focused on the relationship of farm size and agricultural productivity. So my research question is, how has the average farm size in Puerto Rico evolved over the last few decades, and how does this evolution relate to agricultural productivity? And we'll discuss in a bit how agricultural productivity is typically calculated, what I'm doing for this study, and sort of some baseline studies, some seminal papers that discuss TFP, total factor productivity, and compare with pure island nations and small countries in the Caribbean and Central America using the context of Albert Berry's inverse farm size productivity hypothesis. So the reason why I'm interested in this topic is really because of an economist, Albert Berry's study, and that was published in 1972. Sort of the traditional development economics theory and the way that international aid has traditionally worked in countries in the global south has been to develop agriculture in one way, and that's for agriculture to get big and to farm sizes to increase with large investments in infrastructure, large investments in equipment like getting more tractors and implements, and investing in the supply chain so that large sort of agro industry can develop as a response. And that's really to help create a transition period of small, diverse farms to large scale mechanized agriculture. And so Albert Berry in 1972 used some data that was available in Colombia, government agricultural censuses in the 60s that actually showed an inverse farm size productivity relationship. Productivity was calculated as really a production function of a bunch of different inputs that created an agricultural output per hectare. And what he showed is that essentially the small farms were more productive per hectare on a per hectare basis than really large farms. And this was a huge shift. This obviously rocked the boat quite a bit in the international development policy arena because it caused a major shift in supporting small scale farming, more appropriate technologies. It started raising a lot of questions of whether agriculture could be developed in a single way, and that perhaps international development policy, governmental level policy, and investments should be a little bit more holistic to account for um, essentially a reduction in efficiency as farms become larger in size. So the validity of Albert Berry's hypothesis is one that's hotly contested since the 1970s. There have been a number of studies that have applied his theory to many different countries, many different contexts. Very large scale agriculture, like I have a study in the literature review of grain production in Australia, all the way to uh, countries where agriculture is on a very small scale basis, like Malawi in Africa, many other countries in Latin America that have struggled with mechanization or adding technology to agricultural production. So there have been mixed results. Essentially, some have pointed out that Albert Berry's hypothesis and calculations have some limitations. They don't take into account maybe some more modern variables to agriculture, like access to credit or financial institutions. What type of machinery is being used is being coined technological advancements. The fertility. So obviously, even in Puerto Rico, we have an enormous amount of types of soils with different levels of soil fertility that are going to result in different outputs per hectare. Also accounting for microclimates. I would also add their type of farming activity. So it totally depends. So I have studies in literature review that reject Berry's hypothesis in certain scenarios, like grain production in Australia. And I have some that, like one in, like a study in Honduras that is on coffee producers and basically showed that land size did not actually matter at all in terms of the agricultural output per hectare. But some also confirm Berry's hypothesis. So there's a wide range of opinions and studies, but it hasn't been done, at least to my knowledge, has not been done or applied to Puerto Rico, which is why I'm very interested in applying it to this specific context. Um, in terms of our own agricultural context, we've experienced a number of decades of continuous agricultural decline, some serious farm consolidation. So the average size of farms has continued to rise, and we've seen a reduction of 59% of rural population since the year 2000. So you have a rapidly aging farming population. The average age of a farmer here is lots of farms. At the same time, there have been large-scale public and private investments in agro-industrial projects. So the productivity of those projects is unmeasured. And so that's really why I'm interested in doing this study, to see if these large farms in Puerto Rico are actually more productive on a per hectare basis than small farms. So I'd like to compare, I'd like to use some data from the very early agricultural censuses that have been done in this country that look at and measure farm size to look at how that has changed over the decades. And then I have my own calculation for productivity, which would be the market value of the sale value, market value of agricultural produce per hectare. And then ideally compare that with some pure island nations to see to really compare and contrast to some other studies. So that's really a statement of the problem. What are some of the theoretical and conceptual frameworks that I'm using for the purpose of this study? First is what I mentioned, the farm size and productivity relationship, which really Albert Berry and other colleagues that worked on further studies, those are really the seminal papers on this sort of inverse relationship or the hypothesis of the inverse relationship. And their studies, which I've read in detail, have certain assumptions, and the assumptions are that large farms have higher monitoring costs and which reduce the labor efficiency. You start to have a lot of expense in terms of the administration of a large farm, something that you wouldn't typically have at a small farm level, which is typically managed by family labor, or is self-supervised, or in many cases, which is a common phenomenon, mostly in the last few decades, is a reliance on off-farm labor, which is a reality for most farmers throughout the United States and for most farmers in Puerto Rico. Also, some market imperfections. The small landholders may cultivate land more intensely when the agricultural land is difficult to access. It's scarce, it's expensive. Perhaps there's issues of soil exhaustion, the effects of large-scale projects that have gone under and have abandoned agriculture in areas that have left the soil disrupted and exhausted, preventing it from putting into further production. Also, the effect of credit and insurance, which is more of a recent phenomenon, certainly since the 1970s in many countries throughout Latin America. So that's another variable that would be important to study. And not every Latin American country has a farm crop insurance. That is a very nice thing that we have here, but something that does not exist in neighboring countries like the Dominican Republic does not have a well serviced agricultural crop insurance program. Production function and total factor productivity framework. The TFP is something that's kind of more of a traditional development economics scenario and equation that was developed by Robert Solow in the 50s, which had a lot of effect on developing economies back then. Really, that agricultural output is determined by a number of inputs, including land, labor, capital, and materials. Now we know that there are way more factors that affect agriculture, so I would even say that's extremely limited. But it is important to reference that in the context of this study. And lastly, efficiency theory and farm management, that there could be differences in productivity across farms due to technical efficiency. There are some farms, for example, where the use of technology is going to be extremely limited. The coffee industry is one of them. Coffee has to be handpicked. Unless you're in a country like Brazil or Vietnam and you're producing Robusta coffee in the lowland areas and you can use tractors and mechanized agriculture to harvest your crop, the 23 million small-scale family coffee farmers in Latin America have to use labor to handpick coffee. So there's a limitation to the efficiencies of the use of technology at certain levels, depending on the types of farms. So it totally depends. Also depends on education, extension services, and other types of institutional constraints. So in terms of my literature review, I used a Boolean keyword search. I used a number of databases, including JSTOR, Google Scholar, Mendeley, and ChatGPT to identify and screen different studies that are related to the farm size and productivity relationship and other alternative models. I mentioned Barry's seminal work in 1972 had really kind of sent waves through the international development community. So people are still kind of riffing off of Barry's work in the 1970s and applying that to their specific context. I mentioned that there's different and mixed empirical evidence that some suggest or disprove Barry's hypothesis. And there have been other research like the Honduran coffee farmers I mentioned that found no significant relationship between farm size and productivity. Also, other studies have suggested that land size may not be the best factor or variable to measure, and that perhaps other variables like access to mechanization uh, would be more accurate or more precise variable to include in a model. So in terms of the methodology, I'm using USDA agricultural census data. There's census data available all the way back to 1910. But I'm going to be mostly using the 5 most recent agricultural censuses, which haven't changed much. They are very detailed, and they have a couple of important categories that I'll be using for the purpose of this study, including farm size categories. So it does ask for the different sizes of the farms. So you have smaller farms from 1 to 9 cuerdas to farms that are registered at more than 260 cuerdas. So we get actually a nice data set there to be used to test this hypothesis of farm size and the relationship to productivity. So to do a full total factor productivity calculation, that would be an enormous undertaking, probably something that I would hope to do for a dissertation, because that just requires going through all of this data. If I'm going to add additional variables, see what the census data is able to provide in terms of detail. It is pretty detailed, so I feel confident that this factor could be included in a further study. But for the purposes of this study, I'm looking at what the census calls market value of crops sold. So I'm not, again, we could also look at what the farmers say their value is for the crops. And some of those crops may not have reached the market. We know that farmers lose 10 to 15% of their crop just through harvest or pests and disease presence. But for the purposes of this study, I'm looking at market value of crops that are actually reported as being sold from the farms. So that's why I made a little bit more simpler calculation. The regression model I'll be using is a log-log model. The reason why I decided to pursue this specific type of model is because to account for potential changes at different farm size categories. So it's possible that there would be an increase in productivity, then another decrease. So it might end up being more U-shaped as opposed to being a straight line type of model. So I will be using either Excel or Stata, which I've used for other economic studies and analysis. And here is my equation that I'm proposing to use in this study. So lastly, I'll just mention that there is a lot of work still to be done. Would be just the beginning, but I think it's something that should be studied here in terms of its potential impact of public policy for the Department of Agriculture, for also at the local level, also at the federal level, looking at what projects, they're going to make significant public investments in. How do we generate the most productivity out of that? There are other variables that could be included, also included in further studies. For example, what farmers report as the acres that are actually worked versus how many acres they have access to. There's normally a big difference between those two. Also looking at a breakdown by region. So perhaps some regions of Puerto Rico, which typically have about 8 to 10 municipalities reporting in each region, may have more agricultural productivity than others. So I'd like to see, in mountainous regions, the central region of the island, what the farm productivity per hectare looks like compared to other parts of the island. There might be some differences there. Also, the type of farm I referenced that some studies look at specific dairy farms. They look at the dairy sector or they look at grain agriculture. So maybe we could look at, in further studies, coffee farmers or specific sectors of Puerto Rican agriculture. We could look at the age of the operator, the gender of the operator, and other interesting variables that I've been thinking about for further studies. So also, I will note that there are censuses that are available pre-1910 that would be interesting to look at that were conducted by the Spanish government before 1898 to look at farm size and how that shifted as a result of the changing political status. That would be also kind of an interesting area to go with this study in the future. So just in summary, this is a study that I hope would have significant public policy implications at the way that we look at the productivity of agriculture here, and perhaps would change the perspective towards supporting more small-scale, diversified farms.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm just going to pass to Christopher and I'll make comments later. All right. Let's see. And
So do I do my comments now or after I present?
no, you do now because it's fresh on your mind.
Okay. So
Right?
we had a productive meeting before presenting, and I see that he already included some of my observations in this presentation. My main observations that I had when we were going over our outlines was the use of the study from the 70s. I was mentioning that in the case of Puerto Rico, uh, the landscape when it comes to the agroecological movements or the contest has changed significantly. So I found it very curious just to be using something from the 70s. However, throughout the presentation, he has been able to support that use. Another interesting factor that I had noted, I'm sorry, I was just thinking in Spanish, but I'm speaking in English. So I'm trying to translate as I go, was,
You
for
can speak in
example,
Spanish if you like. I can
sí,
understand.
sí, es que estábamos hablando realmente en español y pues tengo todas las notas en español. Me parecía bien interesante, como estaba diciendo Andrew, lo que estábamos hablando sobre la data histórica del censo, la implicación, como cuando estás hablando del punto la ayuda económica, los financial aid, etcétera, cómo entonces, hasta qué punto, cómo esa data puede ser interpretada o cuáles son la, los labels que se utilizan para que entonces los puedas aplicar. Esto me estaba diciendo, por ejemplo, lo de el modelo de en vez del horizontal farming, el vertical, cuando tienen unos modelos un poco más pequeños que se ha visto, por ejemplo, en the Global South, que es el caso de Malawi, con un estudio de caso, o el mismo República Dominicana, que han tenido movimientos agroecológicos exitosos donde quizás se pudiera aplicar más allá de los altos rendimientos por hectáreas, sería más bien eh, hasta qué punto puedes llegar antes de que te aplique the law of diminishing returns. Porque ya si estás empezando ya, por ejemplo, con un small o farm size para poder interpretar cuál es esa rentabilidad o productividad, pues entonces ahí habría que entonces trabajar lo que es bien importante, que es el acceso al financiamiento, al capital y avances tecnológicos debido a lo que en nuestro ambos de nuestros estudios se presenta, que es el factor de que tenemos un aging population que trabaja en estas industrias y entonces a la razón en la cual está siendo reemplazada, pues no es una manera quizás sostenible, y más en Puerto Rico, para poder entonces sacarle provecho a todo, a lo que implica tener un modelo de agricultura con unas fincas un poquito más pequeñas. Lo interesante también sería el, que bueno que lo vas a incluir, la data histórica antes del turnover entre Estados Unidos y España, porque ya existía una gran data histórica y económica cuando Puerto Rico era un país mayormente agrícola. Ahora, después de los 70, estos son casi 15 20 años después de manos a la obra, ver entonces cuál es ese lastre o esa herencia de que de cuando se empieza a hacer en 1910 esas primeras dos o tres censos. Puerto Rico en un país completamente casi agrícola, so, va a haber entonces que poder tomar un snapshot de cómo se fue perdiendo toda esa cantidad de tierra a la industrialización y ahora entonces estamos quizás produciendo más con menos cantidad en términos de tamaño. Respecto al modelo de regresión, me parece interesante porque al estar utilizándolo quizás una relación logarítmica, pues creo que ahí vas a poder hacer what I'm trying to get at, ese skew, ese cambio drástico en terreno disponible vis a lo que quizás había a principios del siglo XX, cuando teníamos la industria del tabaco, la industria de la caña, la industria del café, que ahora es bien curioso que podamos hacer entonces que lo hablas como el caso de Brasil, Vietnam, pero Puerto Rico tuvo y fue un epicentro bien significativo y todavía lo es, tiene ese potencial de tener de los mejores cafés en el mundo, pero aquí una de las cosas que lo que estábamos hablando, por ejemplo, anoche, el caso particular de Puerto Rico, de poder incorporarlo en el marco de negocios internacionales, debido a nuestra situación política, no tenemos quizás la misma capacidad de poder negociar a nivel de pares, de tú a tú con otros países, y la implicación de costo es astronómica, ¿no? Nos pone una ventaja bien desfavorable a no ser que estemos utilizando la sombrilla de los Estados Unidos, que suele ser el caso de toda la mayor parte de la actividad económica en Puerto Rico, es básicamente Estados Unidos, y de ahí un pequeño como un paralelismo de podernos exponer al comercio internacional, pero siempre bajo esa sombra, bajo esa sombrilla de lo que es los Estados Unidos. Y lo otro, hablamos también ayer, era el hecho de cómo tenemos muchos ejemplos de la realidad, la ventaja climatológica, la riqueza de suelos que tenemos, son quizás poder, ya que tenemos unas limitaciones en Puerto Rico por situación política, ver un poco más a fondo qué se está haciendo en las demás islas. República Dominicana es un caso interesante, en el caso también la costa Caribe que tienen países, por ejemplo, en Centroamérica, Nicaragua, Honduras o Surinam, que tienen acceso a costa del Caribe, que también han podido sacar partida del World Food Program y el International Aid o Mutual Aid. So, sea una manera interesante de poder eh, dar o operacionalizar lo que Puerto Rico geográficamente es parte del Caribe, somos parte, o a nivel político estamos aislados, no parecemos o creemos que estamos completamente en Estados Unidos, geográficamente estamos en el Caribe. Pero Puerto Rico tiene muchas particularidades bien interesantes que hacen que hablar inclusive de agricultura lo hace mucho más rico teóricamente y de manera metodológica. Y lo del USDA, que es bueno porque da la oportunidad de que you can cluster it, ¿no? Como por ejemplo, estábamos hablando de cómo usualmente cuando uno entra a bases de datos en Estados Unidos, Puerto Rico suele estar mounting con US Virgin Islands y Estados Unidos. Pero en el caso particular, when it comes to farm size, el USDAC le da a Puerto Rico aislado, que es contrario a lo que me pasa a mí con el té. Puerto Rico está mezclado pues, from US Virgin Islands and the mainland, which makes it a little bit more challenging. Overall, yo diría que lo más que me llama la atención es el hecho de que mucho ha cambiado en el panorama en Puerto Rico, pues a la misma vez curioso que todavía podamos estar aplicando un estudio seminal de los 70. Esa es la parte que más me interesa de tu trabajo, el hecho de que you're holding up a model or a study, que no sé, no soy un erudito en el área, pero me llama la atención después de Debbie, quién más quizás ha hecho algo similar o que ha pasado en el Caribe, para poder quizás nutrir o darle ah, más supporting elements a eso que plantea. Son de las cosas, son de mis observaciones más puntuales. En el término del manejo de la data, pues son fuentes, Puerto Rico, pues, puede ser fuentes normalmente del gobierno, normalmente Estados Unidos, o maybe,
Sorry,
no sé si
Christopher.
la,
Christopher.
yeah, yes.
Yeah, I just have to interrupt you because the presentation is supposed to be 15 minutes and the critique 5 minutes, right?
Okay, I totally forgot
No,
about that.
and
Sorry,
it's okay.
sorry.
You're riffing. It's good. It's fine. It's just that I want to have enough time, but I think the points are well made. You guys can continue your conversation. I just want to make a few points.
Sí.
Thank you, Christopher. Always so well a wealth of information. I want to make a few points. Okay, first, um, even George is there. I want you guys, just like you did on your assignments, you did 5 models. I want 5 models in your paper.
Oh, I'm not.
And Andrew, he suggested, different models, different structural forms, and you also mentioned control variables. Is that true, Andrew? Things you're going to include, but you have to see what's available to include them, I imagine. So that's going to be a limitation for you if you can't find them. But there definitely needs to be controls in there. And you mentioned a few, Christopher, and also Andrew, fertility of soil, things like that. And and then different models. So I want 5 models. How are you going to get 5 models? You're going to run the first one. You're going to do the diagnostics. You're going to see how can I fix this? You're going to get another model. If you don't have 5 outright, you're going to develop 5 easily, and you're going to compare them somehow. Andrew has experience with panel data analysis, which is good. Just I want to see also the diagnostic checks. You don't have to show me everything. I just at least want to see 5. I want to see a table with 5 and you comparing them, figuring out how you compare these models to pick the right one. And they're not the last one, like I said, you might take your paper and go on and do something else. Those are the main things I want to say about the models. References, George, I don't know, you didn't have a reference page at the end. Andrew didn't have a reference. You guys mentioned all these papers, but I don't have any references. I know I have them in the Excel file, but they should be in your presentation, okay? So in your proposal at the end, you can list all references you mention. Also, Andrew, journal, conference, and reviewers. Okay, that shouldn't take too long, like a half an hour to think about it, search around. You need to be going to an international business conference. I know your paper is economics, and I'm so interested in your paper, but I have trouble because I don't see it as international business. I think it's interesting, but I need you to think about the spin. I don't know. I don't really exactly want you to change your question at this late date, and I'm letting it go, but I shouldn't because I'm forcing everybody to do international business, international trade, international commerce, something. But you're doing Puerto Rico. Um, anyway, I don't know because I like your topic. I'm kind of letting it go. It's more economics. You have to admit it's more economics. If you can think of a way to spin it into business, trade, something about uh yeah, I don't think it's possible actually at this point. But I'm gonna let it go. But if you can write me in the last part where you do the recommendations, you can write something about that at least when you finish the paper. If you can promise me that it can be spun somehow. You follow me? I mean, I'm letting you get away with it.
Definitely. Yeah, I'll include a little section on
I'm
the
interested in this
implication.
project, but it's not international business. Exactly. So you'll see that because you see from your literature review. Everybody else, I'm forcing you to do international business for your sake, but I think there's something here for him where he can talk about export markets or, you know, viability of export markets from multitude of smaller farms and spin it. Okay, so other than that, let's see what else I have here. Did you mention your data set, Andrew?
Yes, the USDA
Oh, you
agricultural
did.
census.
Okay. And you got to see what's in there. Okay. Um, and okay, I need less words on your presentation. You got to have more snazzy summaries on your presentation. Okay. You have kind of a grouping of literature. So just put the literature and with a theme. Like you have patterns of literature, positive relationship, negative relationship, whatever. Just if you can divide it up in a more clean way, that would be nice for a presentation. That's what I want to see from you in the next iteration. You guys, when you present your final results, that's what I want to see, because you're going to present this again, but clean it up, right? And then, but I really enjoyed your presentation, and you convinced me to let you do this. You mentioned, yeah, different structural forms, and you mentioned including covariates. I want to see that too. If you can maybe make a list in this when you revise your presentation, make a list of those. So do what you can to clean it up along the lines I've said. I will post this video. If you can't write all that down, you can review the video, okay, and what I said at the end. Okay, I hope that helps everybody. Um, and what else? What else? What else? I think that's it. And then we can go to Christopher. All right, let's take a break. Let's take a break. 5 minutes?
Okay.
Let's take a break. Okay, 5 minutes.
Of my outline so that then we're able to just have the discussion. I'll start with a brief introduction as to my topic, why I chose it, and the relevance, and then I'll start moving towards there. So in the similar the problem or the introduction, the significance of tea, I just want to give a very brief rundown, is that after water, tea is the most consumed beverage in the world. This millennial drink has been a significant source of income in the
Christopher, I
Himalayan
don't
region.
see your presentation. Did you make it? You said you're going to share your screen?
No, I said that I won't be able to because I wasn't able to finish a PowerPoint, so I'm just gonna go through
Okay, you're going
the
to work.
outline of my, yeah, I'm gonna work on it, to the outline of my paper so that I'm able to present something because I just had so much data, I didn't have time to organize it in a PowerPoint. But
Okay,
for the introduction, I'm just gonna go through the areas. So when it comes to tea, it's very important to know that after water, tea is the most consumed beverage in the world. And historically, this plant traveled through the ancient tea horse road that connected Yunnan, which is China, Tibet, India, and neighboring Himalayan countries. Starting in the birthplace of tea, which is China, caravans were transported to start an international commerce route by land where tea was used as a currency to exchange for horse, jewels, fabrics, and spices. Now, this route was one of the most important in the Himalayan region and was used uninterrupted since the 6th century up until the 28th century when Mao Zedong founds the People's Republic of China and shuts down this road in this cultural revolution. Now, following the liberation of China's economy after the death of Mao in 1976, tea experienced a growth bubble that expanded onto the 1990s and resulted in an exponential growth in the exportation of tea from China to major key markets such as the United States. Given the global history of this beverage, there are other major key exporters of tea, such as India, Sri Lanka, Kenya. Each of them have their own context as to how they came to grow in tea. But the most important part is, and one of the main context analysis is going to be China because this is the ground zero. This is where tea starts. Now, for delimitation purposes, this paper I'll be focusing from the period of 2000 until 2020, as this decade saw significant growth in production and consumption, shifts in trade patterns, and the rise of new consumer preferences, according to some of my sources like the World Agricultural Organization and the International Institute of Sustainable Development, amongst other international bodies of market information. To better understand the nuances of the global dynamics of the tea trade, my research question or the question that will be explored in this article is how do international trade tariffs, exchange rates, and logistics costs affect the export volume of tea from major producing countries to key global markets? Now, when it comes to the hypothesis that I have developed three main hypotheses, which is number one, higher tariffs negatively affect tea export volume. Number two, favorable exchange rates, basically weaker domestic currency, will increase export volumes. And number three, increased logistics costs reduce export volume. Now, when it comes to the conceptual or theoretical frameworks, the main, based on my literature review, I'll be focusing on three major theoretical frameworks to sort of limit or guide my research. First and foremost, the gravity model of trade. This is going to help me explain trade flow based on economic size and distance. I am comparing, for example, China has a wealth of land, a millennial tradition of producing tea. They had a monopoly up until the end of the 19th century after the two Opium Wars, when England steals the plant and they take it to India, and that's how India became a powerhouse of tea. Another theoretical framework that I'll be using that's going to help me sort of track tea from point A to point C is going to be the supply chain cost theory, focusing on the logistics and operational efficiency. In the 21st century, the majority or the biggest bulk of tea is still transported via boat and air carrier. So these two variables influence significantly the cost of transportation. Now, in terms of what is the limitations or the challenges that I have been facing when doing my paper, the main challenge has been the access to live data on the cost variable. And I say live data because I am using sources, for example, the USDA, the United Nations Comtrade. I'm also using the file, and these are all data that have the years that I am exploring. However, in the case of the USDA, they have data for tea, but the numbers that they give me, I already have two Excel spreadsheets for the importation of tea. The numbers that they are giving me already take into account the cost of taxes paid in the customs, tariffs, and transportation costs. So my challenge is sort of seeing what percentage or what is the impact of transportation costs in the final volume which I am finding. Now, the so what factor or the importance of this research is that tea is a major significant source of income and accounts for sometimes 5 to 10% of the gross domestic product of nations, for example, like Sri Lanka. That is something very significant because even though they are smaller in size, tea employs a significant amount of people in rural regions, provinces entirely depend on tea. The same applies for India, for example. In the south and west regions, west of the Bengal, we have Darjeeling, we have Assam. All of these provinces live off exclusively, well, not exclusively, but mostly off tea. So this is something that maximizing the efficacy of tea in the major exporting countries will translate into major economical growth. Specifically in the 2 decades that I'm studying, where is when we start seeing how tea is imported, is exported in its raw form, and then converted into ready-to-drink auctions, complemented with boba, and we also have the phenomenon of matcha, which is basically a craze. Everybody wants matcha, putting a strain on major tea producing countries. This is something that has not been seen before. The For the definitions and the terms as to what are the major terms that I'll be using is going to be basically two major terms related to tea. The first is the cut, tear, and curl method, which is when tea is processed by machine. And if you have ever used a tea bag, you see how sometimes that is basically almost dust. It's like very, very compressed, very processed tea. That is one of the ways that tea is exported. And then there's the orthodox method, which is the loose leaf tea. Statistics for both of these options are codified in the USDA. They have the customs codes for tea, which is 0902, corresponds to tea in its unprocessed form. And then they have another code for tea, which is tea in its processed form, and this includes sachets and tea bags. For the literature review, the search strategy that was used, first and foremost, was Boolean search words, but also direct Google Scholar searches. And I did use Microsoft Copilot to assist me with the condensation and organization of papers in the first stages of my literature review. For my literature review, I have two main areas of finding. Number one has been that other articles, such as the seminal papers that I am using, one of them has to do with the market integration theory. In the paper that explores the question whether or not tea global prices or the auction markets are integrated, it was found that even though tea is in the process, or the industry is in the process of transitioning from a classical auction or heckler system, is being digitalized. There is still a process where the competition from each country, even though it runs parallel, it does have an influence in major key players. For example, we have the case of China, that is the major or the biggest exporter of tea, but Sri Lanka has a higher quality tea and fetches a higher price, even though they're newer to the industry as opposed to China. When it comes to my three variables of the research question, for example, in the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement between India and Nepal and Sri Lanka, to my surprise, it was found that even though the biggest player or the biggest producer of tea in Southeast Asia is India, they rather lose tariff revenue in order to obtain net gains in consumer satisfaction, given the fact that their major volume of tea is sold to companies, for example, up until 2021, Unilever, which is Lipton, Starbucks. So the majority of their production is for exportation, but for consumption, they import tea from other regions based on the perceived quality. So that is something that closely relates and influences in a subjective manner or an indirect way the variable of tariff, because they willingly lose the tariff revenue in order to obtain the consumer satisfaction of their immense global consumer market. The other theories and models that my literature review has explored, besides the market integration theory, has been the, let's see here, I had the number here. It was basically how tea markets, it is theorized that they are all interconnected, that they all have a direct influence with each other, but that is not entirely the case. In the global value chain theory, it was produced, for example, how the value of the tea that was exported to Kenya relatively to its value in US dollar helped position Kenya as a leader in the tea exportation market, but this was just pretty much a case of cost. Consumers or importers in the US rather go to Kenya due to favorable currency exchange rates, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are producing or that they have a superior or a good quality of tea. So I have decided based on the literature review that I have that I'm just going to be using the three theories of gravity model of trade, supply chain cost theory, and the market integration theory. But the market integration theory, I am using it just so that I'm able to just compare how the different geographical regions that are exporting tea interact amongst each other because it is in their best interest that tea always have almost like a base price. It never exceeds or never goes below that. Now, for the methodology and what are the subjects or the countries that I am analyzing, I am focusing when it comes to exporting countries, I am using China, India, Sri Lanka, and Kenya. And for importing countries, I am using the US, the UK, the UAE, and the Russian Federation. The data sources that I am using, I think I already mentioned it, is going to be the FAO. It's going to be also the United States International Trade Commission, which is basically they give you the trade and tariff data. And I also have the United States Comtrade databases and the USDA. The country from which I have the most bulk of statistics is the US because their websites are mostly they're very structured and I can filter it by region. For the UK, UAE, and Russian Federation, I am basing myself on the United Nations Comtrade data assuming and being aware of the limitations or operationalization challenges that I will have because these are statistics self-reported by each of these countries. And for the periods when I do the search, the UN then does a report if the country already met the requirement and every year or every quarter they gave the statistics that they get published. So one of the challenges will be perhaps how can I cross-reference data from the Russian Federation, for example? In the case of China, in the 1976 until 1990, China did a comprehensive, very detailed report, which I was able to find to Sistema de Bibliotecas, basically a breakdown of all their tea exports. So that is the core data that I have as a historical reference. It's the only time that China allowed fiscalization of their econometric statistics. After that period, all that they have been doing is just self-reporting to the United Nations. So even though I am aware that that presents some sort of margin or error or deviation, it is still robust data that will allow me to do comparison across the countries that I'm interested. The other the other part as to the criteria for coding, I'll be using the customs code for team, which is universal, the integrated harmonious tariff system. They have a code for team, which is 0902 in the USDA. And in the United Nations, T also has a universal code where each country reports T under customs or a commodity code. I do have to point out that when it comes to using the United Nations data, tea is reported alongside other evergreens like peppers, spearmints, mints, and sometimes even coffee and cacao. So a reasonable question will be then, how will I know if what I am doing corresponds specifically to tea? That's where I have the data of each of these countries. They have a tea expansion board or a tea exportation database where I can access historical auction pricing data that I'm able to compare with the volumes. And so far, it is a good indication that by using the commodity code of tea, even though the UN can lump your tea amongst other commodity. They also give me the option to just focus on process or unadulterated tea alongside other, for example, products related to the trade of tea. The other part that I have, as for the regression or the model, I'm gonna put it in the chat because this I do have. I do have a regression equation set up, which is basically a multi-linear equation where the export value is gonna be almost like a aggregation or summary where I'm basically doing that for I'm trying to predict the export value of tea from a country in a year based on tariffs exchange rate and logistics costs and other variables that may affect it. Now, for my methodology, initially I was worried as to how I was gonna be able to go through so many monthly data of exchange rates. These databases that I am using, they already done the conversion using historical data from each central bank. They convert the volumes based on cents on the dollar. So they already did the conversion. I won't have to go through that exercise. I am aware that by doing an average conversion rate, it might be a little bit throw off, but maybe for future researches, I could do perhaps a dissertation or a later date. I could go through the exercise of doing the exchange rate conversions myself, as well as doing a more robust econometrics analysis. For the operationalizations of the variables or conceptual models, I'll be using Microsoft Excel, which is the platform that I'm currently using. I'm not well versed in other statistical software, and I'll pretty much be applying some of my papers. They've done they've done models on exports of tea, but they have done it using GDP. In my case, I am not focused on GDP. I am focusing on just the raw value or the macroeconomic impact that tea has on the in terms of the gains or the profit. So I'm using those articles as
For
supporting
one more
material.
minute, Christopher, one more minute.
Yes, yes, and I'm rushing up. And then after we for the data analysis methods and tools, then I'll just be using Microsoft Excel. I have to identify because I completely forgot it. Sorry about the journal to publish as well as the conference that I would want to present. But this is pretty much I've been focusing on just gathering the data. I have multiple spreadsheets already that I have downloaded from a database, so now I just have to clean the data and start mounting all the pieces together. So this is what I've had thus far for the outline of my paper.
So you're gonna make a presentation and send that to me by Friday, right?
Yes, yes.
Being um I need to see also those five models, so some suggestion of the five models, or maybe at least three, and then suggesting you're gonna check the structural form by doing the diagnostic checks, and that you will consider controls for your models, right? The controls, remember confounding factors, variables that are not in your model that affect both the dependent and an independent variable, or many of them at the same time. Those have to be control factors, control variables. Okay, so you're going to need to distinguish between that. Anyway, so if you need any help with that, you're going to have to see me. I'm going to turn to Andrew for commentary at this moment.
Yes, Christopher, and I had a chance to meet yesterday to go over each of our projects, and some of the suggestions I had for Christopher were just to, since this we're dealing with a crop and having a lens of agricultural economics, I feel like there's some variables to consider that may not be some additional variables to consider, like Climate, for example, many of these countries that are large tea producers are deeply impacted by El Nino and La Nina effect in the Pacific. So whether it's whatever year might whatever weather effect may heavily impact the export, also national consumption. Many of those countries that produce teas also consume a lot of tea internally. So that may be also a variable to consider in terms of how that affects export volumes. Um, just going like an additional, more internal factors within the country that may affect export volumes. And then another one may be just the land area, since it's focused on export volumes. A country like China would have extensive amounts of land dedicated to producing tea. And so you might want to account for an additional variable of how many hectares are in production of tea in each of those countries to see if how that affects export volume on a given year. Other than that, yeah, I mean the data sets that Christopher mentioned, I think are great. I think there's a lot of important information to be gathered from there. I think it may be challenging to clean data and make sure that each of the numbers that of different countries are uh, you're comparing apples to apples, I guess, and from one country to the other. But those were my main comments and suggestions from our meeting yesterday.
Wonderful. Thank you. Better than I could have done. Thank you very much, Andrew. That was great. Any other comments from anyone else? Okay, so you guys are both on the way to do really great papers. Like I said, I will specify, I'll have an upload link with what I expect to see from you, and then also for next week, that draft paper. So you have a lot to do this week. You have a lot to do this week. All right, so I'm gonna pass on next to the next group, which was, I think, Alexandra and Karjit. So who wants to go first?
I will go first. I'll listen here. Can you hear me?
Sí, te escuchas, te escuchas.
Okay, no. Se ve todo. Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexandra Melendez, and I'll be presenting on digital transformation and product adaptation among Mexican small and medium enterprises, SMEs, assessing expert performance in the post-USMCA era.
Alexandra, sorry, just hold on a second. I don't know why Christopher is so viewed there. Okay, hold on, hold on.
Okay. Let you know.
Alexandra, creo que eres tú, que tienes que mover
Sí,
eh,
mueve la ventanita.
ponlo en el minimize, en lo más pequeño, para que no te afecte lo que estamos viendo.
Es que no sé qué están viendo.
No, cuando compartes tu pantalla, salimos
I'll do
nosotros,
the
como
full
que
screen. I'll do the full screen. I think that will help.
Outdo it.
I will make it full screen. I think that will help. I don't know. This is so weird. I don't know. It looks so different. Oh, now I lost you. I'm not sure what's going on, but okay, let's just continue, whatever.
Am I good to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Um, okay. My research question is how have small and medium-sized enterprises in Mexico adjusted their export marketing strategies, specifically product adaptation and digital trade integration, in response to the implementation of the USMCA? Let's begin with what USMCA is. Before, we had what was known as NAFTA, or North America Free Trade Agreement. This was a trade accord between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, implemented in 1994. Its objective was to eliminate trade barriers and promote the flow of goods, services, and investments across North America. By removing tariffs on most products and establishing clear rules governing trade, investment, and intellectual property. This agreement aimed to increase economic efficiency and competitiveness within the region by integrating the three economies into a single market. Now, USMCA, or the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, replaced NAFTA in 2020. It was designed to modernize and rebalance North American trade relations to better reflect 21st century economic realities. The study is based on dynamic capabilities theory by David Teese. It explains how firms can achieve sustained competitive advantage by continuously integrating, building, and reconfiguring their resources and competencies to adapt to a volatile environment instead of only focusing on what a company already has. This theory looks at how flexible it can be when facing new challenges. The study argues that SMEs capable of reconfiguring internal processes through product innovation and digital transformation achieve superior expert performance when responding to institutional and technological shifts, such as those triggered by the USMCA. According to this theory, firms that can adapt their products and make strong use of digital trade tools are more likely to improve their export performance. Digital trade integration creates the environment that makes exporting easier, while product adaptation makes the firm's products more competitive in that environment. For clarity, we'll define product adaptation as a modification of a firm's goods and services to meet the cultural, regulatory, or technical requirements of foreign markets, enabling firms to align offerings with host market expectations and institutional conditions. And digital trade integration as the adoption of digital platforms, e-commerce systems, and cross-border data processes that enhance marketing communication and export coordination across markets. So what? The findings of this study are expected to contribute to the international business and marketing literature by integrating the adaptation standardization debate, which we will talk about in a bit, with the emerging digitalization perspective in a trade agreement context. Originally, I wanted to include all three countries, the United States, Mexico, and Canada, and how each adjusted their export marketing strategies, specifically product adaptation, digital trade integration, and a third independent variable, which was cross-border partnerships. However, there was limited availability of comparable firm-level data across all of them, so the analysis was narrowed to focus on Mexico. And due to time constraints, the independent variables were brought down to two, these being product adaptation and digital trade integration. So, the question of how firms adjust their marketing strategies for foreign markets has been debated for decades, with studies focusing on the trade-off between adaptation and standardization. For example, Doe showed that exporters tend to under-adapt, which means that they stop short of the level of adaptation that would maximize performance. In 2009, Bronces, Theriso, and Lampriano found that companies usually fall somewhere between full adaptation and full standardization, influenced by laws, competition, and cost. Later research in 2019 confirmed that adapting products to institutional and cultural differences increases export success. However, standardization still has value. In 2009, Silk, Raymond, and Thomas discovered that keeping marketing strategies consistent across countries improves performance when firms have strong coordination and cost leadership structures. And a study by John Kim So in 2018 reported that Japanese firms using standardized strategies perform better when they sell premium products. Overall, Most studies agree that the best approach depends on context, as adaptation and standardization are not opposites, but complementary strategies. In the past few years, research has shifted towards digital transformation and dynamic marketing capabilities. In 2020, Wang found that digital marketing capabilities help firms manage relationships and increase expert results. In 2023, Zahur and Liu added that during crises, digital tools combined with strategic flexibility can protect expert performance. And 2024 actually extended this idea, showing that data analytics and digital governance improve performance when properly integrated into marketing processes. And finally, reports from OECD in 2024 also support this trend, showing that SMEs using digital trade platforms have high productivity and easier access to global value chains. Studies on global versus local branding tie into product adaptation. Davidas and Halkias in 2019 showed that global brands are usually seen as more competent, while local brands are viewed as warmer and more relatable. And the same author went further in 2023, finding that consumers in emerging markets will pay more for products with strong local attributes, where in developed markets, global cues command higher prices. These findings suggest that adaptation also works through brand image and consumer psychology, not just through product design. Okay. The most common theoretical base in these studies is dynamic capabilities theory, which, as we've discussed, it explains how firms sense opportunities, seize them, and reconfigure resources to adapt to changing environments. Several studies also apply contingency theory or strategic fit model, which argues that there is no single best strategy because performance depends on how well a firm's strategy matches its environment. Another one is institutional theory, as it explains how cultural and regulatory distances affect the benefits of adaptation. Research-based view highlights digital capabilities as unique assets that provide competitive advantage. Newer studies introduce relationship-based views, such as agency theory and relational governance, to show how trust and cooperation mediate expert success. Relational fit theory emphasizes that strategic decisions emerge from ongoing social interactions rather than static trade-offs. Control theory explores how e-commerce firms manage foreign operations, and open innovation theory suggests that external knowledge ties enhance international performance. The consensus is that SMEs thrive when they can combine tangible changes like product design with intangible ones like digital competencies. The study uses UN-country data on Mexico's exports to the United States and Canada. This is complemented with firm-level data from the World Bank Enterprise Survey, with a sample size of 210 SMEs, which provides information on company size, innovation activity, and expert participation. This combined with OECD Indigo indicators that capture the country's progress in digital trade integration. The dependent variable export performance captures Mexico's export growth and overall trade value with its USMCA partners. The first independent variable, digital trade integration, represents Mexico's readiness to participate in digital trade and e-commerce. The other independent variable, product adaptation, reflects the ability of SMEs to modify or innovate their products to meet market demands. The study tests two hypotheses, which are that product adaptation among SMEs is positively associated with export performance, and that digital trade integration improves Mexico's export performance with USMCA partners. For the first regression analysis, these hypotheses will be evaluated with multiple linear regression, with export growth as a dependent variable and both product adaptation and digital integration as independent variables. I chose the International Marketing Review as an appropriate journal for my paper because it publishes studies on marketing adaptation, standardization, expert performance, which directly aligns with my topic. The Academy of International Business annual meeting because it's the leading international business conference for research on trade agreements, SMEs, and digitalization. And it frequently features panels on marketing strategy, institutional change, and SME internalization. And finally, I chose Dr. Sahu, Dr. Wang, and Dr. Vrontis as my expert reviewers because they all have expertise in similar topics in my study. The expected results of the study are to find a positive relationship between product adaptation and expert performance among Mexican small and medium enterprises after the implementation of the USMCA. A positive relationship between digital trade integration and expert performance in Mexican small and medium enterprises after USMCA, and that both variables complement each other, where firms that adopt products and digitalized processes should perform better internationally. The next steps are to finalize data analysis in Microsoft Excel using regression output and visualization, interpret statistical significance and compare with existing literature, and to apply feedback and revise the assignment. These are my references, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alexandra. You answered my questions at the end and did the references without me asking. That's great. And I want more details though for those. I want to know. I want to know the contact information for your references, and I want to know the conference, where it is, the date, things like that.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
also, I think you need to have a regular size font. I think it was pretty good though. I mean, you could improve your presentation, but it was pretty good. Just needs to be improved. Um, more spread out, larger font in some places, and then when you do your literature review, I think it should be a little more organized by theme or something. You did kind of chronology, but go by themes maybe, and chronology, or anyway, because you were doing it
Okay.
kind of in order of year, but maybe lay out the years or do something to just present it more efficiently. I didn't understand though what your data source is. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. What's your data source?
My databases.
Yeah.
UN
Where you're going to
conference
get the
for
data from. Where you're going to get the data from for this.
me. Who's that this again? I had UN contract for the independent variable. The dependent variable that was export performance. We're a bank enterprise survey for um, innovation, product innovation, and I got data from US ECD for digital trade integration.
What I would have liked to see is how you operationalize your independent variables. You had a couple there, and which variables are you using out of this database? Like, I would like to know, like that you've identified exactly what you're going to use. Because there's lots of variables there, but I don't know which one you're going to choose
Okay.
to use. So maybe you can put that into your presentation as well. And then you're very vague about your models. Because I think you need to explore the database and see what's there. What do you think? You need some time to figure out which variables you're going to use. And
Okay.
but your papers should help you. The papers that you chose should help you with your modeling. Okay. But you
Okay.
have a good draft. That's a good draft. You got to improve the
Thank you.
draft, but you did well. You touched on most of the things I wanted to see. Maybe you should mention your theoretical model before the conceptual model. And then with the conceptual model, you want to mention those variables again, which are the variables you're going to use for those relationships. Okay, sorry, I interrupted. I'm supposed to let Karjit do that, but okay, Karjit, I'll let you. Did I take your thunder? Sorry.
Don't worry, Professor. Thank you. Good afternoon. So Alexandra and I had spoken about her presentation beforehand, and Alexandra excellent presentation. You did a very good job defining your topic and building a logical flow of the UMCA on the theoretical foundation and then your methodology. I really appreciate that you based your work on dynamic capabilities theory and it tied it directly to the product adaptation and digital trade integration. I understood it pretty clear when I saw your presentation. That was the good part. Now, however, I do have a couple things that I would add that I did not mention to you. I found them while you were doing the presentation. Since the critique is meant to focus on what's still missing, I'm just going to highlight a few areas. The presentation would have benefited a little bit with a slide with practical significance on what your findings could mean for SMEs in Mexico. You can add a slide explaining that the results could help in Mexican government or trade institutions designed for better SME support programs focused on digital integration and product innovation. This would connect your findings in real world outcomes and show that your work has more value beyond academia. Also, you talked about the limitations, and I would suggest that you add future research agenda possibilities that you could study what currently lacks or the gaps that are there. For instance, your database covered only 6 years of data and focused solely on Mexico. I know this is phase one, but even though your topic involves a trinational agreement, a short slide summarizing these points would be very helpful for the people seeing the presentation and be able to understand it. Followed by listing possible extensions, such as adding, I don't know, quantitative interviews or panel data for future research. That would make it a little bit more balanced when it comes to presenting it. But overall, I enjoyed it a lot. It helped. We integrated a lot both of our presentations. So good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Gurjeet. Did you want to say anything, Alexander?
I have work to do this week. But thank you guys so much.
You are not alone. Everyone has work to do, I think. So. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to pass to Karjit for his presentation then.
Can everyone hear me?
Sí.
Yeah, what's wrong with where are you? Where are you? Because there's some noise, background noise.
Let me turn off the fan. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't want you to sweat.
It's okay. It's okay. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Karjit Kalani, and today I'll be presenting my research proposal titled Organizational Agility, Supply Chain Resilience, and Export Performance, Evidence for Latin American SMEs. Latin America's small and medium enterprises operate in a high volatile environment. Weak institutions, logistic insufficiencies, and limited innovation capacities make exporting difficult. Even though trade agreements exist, export performance remains inconsistent. My study asks basically what internal capabilities help firms not only survive, but compete globally. That's where organizational agility and supply chain resilience come in. This research matters to me because it shows managers and policymakers how adaptability and innovation can drive sustainable growth and regional development. The purpose of the study is to examine how organizational agility influences supply chain resilience and export performance among SMEs in Latin America. The guiding research question is, as I stated in my assignment 2, how does organizational agility impact supply chain resilience and export performance in Latin American firms? Essentially, I'm exploring whether agile firms become more resilient and if the resilience translate into better export outcomes. When it comes to my hypotheses, I have 3. I have four, I'm sorry. The first one would be agility positively influences resilience. The second one would be resilience positively influences export performance. The third one would be agility directly improves export performance. And the fourth one would be resilience mediates the relationship between agility and export performance. This will later be tested using multiple regression and mediation analysis with the World Bank database. When it comes to key concepts and definitions, to understand the core concepts, there are organizational agility is when the firm's ability to sense change and reconfigure resource rapidly, often through innovation or process redesign. Supply chain resilience is the ability to anticipate, absorb, and recover from disruptions such as transport delays or custom barriers. And export performance reflects how well a firm achieves international sales growth, profitability, and market diversification. These definitions provide basically the foundation for the theoretical model I'll describe next. When it comes to the theoretical foundation, there are three theories that anchor this research. The first one is a resource-based view by Burney in 1991, which explains that firms succeed when they possess valuable, rare, immutable, and non-substitutable resources like innovation capability. The second one would be, just like Alexandra, dynamic capability framework by Teeth 1997, which builds on the resource-based view by showing how firms reconfigure those resources to face changing environments. Agility is one of those dynamic capabilities. And the third one would be institutional theory, North 1990 and Scott 2001. Reminds us that firms operate within regulatory and cultural systems. In Latin America, institutional weaknesses often force firms to rely on internal agility and resilience. Together, these theories explain why agile, resilient firms outperform others in volatile contexts. When it comes to the literature review summary or my references, I categorize them in four because there's so many. I did about approximately 18 when it comes to regressional analysis, and I think I'm up to 5 or 6 in conceptual. I categorize them in in areas. The first one would be expert performance, where I have Langer and Malka, 2016 and 2020, which finds that institutional barriers limit export, but innovation improves outcomes. When it comes to agility and dynamic capabilities, Thies 1997 and Shams 2021 describe agility as the ability to sense and seize opportunities. In resilience, Enoff, Dolgi 2020, and Rodriguez Gonzalez 2023 show that digital culture and absorptive capacity enhances resilience and sustainability. Institutional context, Cuervo, Casura 2021, and Aparicio 2025 demonstrate that innovation can offset weak institutions. The gap was very clear when you see very few Latin American studies test agility and resilience together as predictors of export performance using large data sets. When it comes to my research strategy and the way I used AI for transparency, here's how I built my literature base. I searched Google Scholar, Scopus, Science Direct using keywords such as organizational agility or supply chain resilience export performance and Latin American SMEs. All of these was used in the Boolean search strategies. I did not put them here as Boolean, but in the paper that will be presented that way. And I focused on peer-reviewed articles from 2016 to 2025. I used AI tools to organize citations, summarize key findings, and structure the literature review to be able to have it organized. However, all the analysis, interpretation, and final writing decisions were entirely mine. When it comes to the conceptual model, I illustrated it in this diagram where you have organization agility leads to a stronger supply chain resilience, which in turn enhances export performance, which the control variables include firm size, age, firm age, and the sector. The arrows reflect the hypotheses previously stating that positive relationships tested, which will test that positive relationships using the regressional models that I'll explain later. When it comes to methodology, I use secondary data from the World Bank Enterprise Surveys. I use Peru 2017. It has a sample size of 1,005 firms in manufacturing, service, and retail. The periods used was from March 2017 to March 2018. The data collected was a face-to-face interview with firm owners and managers. Softwares I will be using will be Excel, Office 365, used in San Juan, Puerto Rico, while from the university, and Power BI later to do the regression. I'll be doing it first in Excel, and Power BI, I'll use it just to make sure that I did it correctly in Excel because I know how to use Power BI. The data management, I recoded yes and no questions to 1 and 2 and removed missing values and outliers for a cleaner regression. For my variables, and so I'm gonna show you how I measured each variable using the World Bank Enterprise Survey from Peru. My dependent variable or outcome is exporting performance. It will be measured by the percent of total sales that go to the international market. My independent variable or main predictor is organizational agility. I use 3 indicators: whether the firm introduced a new product, a new process, or whether it invested in R&D. These reflect how flexible and innovative the company is. Then I have a mediator, which is supply chain resilience, which shows how well firms handle disruptions. I measured this using the number of days it takes to clear customs and how managers rated obstacles related to transportation and customs. The idea is that fewer delays and fewer obstacles mean more resilience. Finally, I included a control variables such as the firm size, which I stated before, firm age, and the industry sector to make sure that the difference in export performance aren't simply due to larger or older firms. Basically, agility is about innovation, resilience is about handling disruptions, and exports are the results. All of these are captured directly from the reliable World Bank firm level data, which I got from Peru 2017. When it comes to my regression models, I have 3. I will be including the next 2 in the paper. The first one, in the first model, I tested whether more agile firms have tighter export performance. This gives me the direct relationship. In model 2, I add supply chain resilience to see if it explains part of the effect of that effect. This helps me see whether agility improves exports because it helps firms become more resilient. And then I run a mediation test, which basically checks if resilient acts as a bridge between agility and export performance. In both agility and resilience, if both agility and resilience are significant and the effect of agility becomes smaller once I add resilience, that means resilience is indeed playing a mediating role. I'll control for firm size, the age, and the sector in all the models to keep the result as clean as comparable as possible. And basically, in simple terms, I'm going to be testing if Agile helps companies bounce back after or faster from disruptions, and if that is what really makes it more successful exporters or not. When it comes to the primary results and the next steps, I will be doing descriptive analysis which I'm currently doing for the paper. I'll complete the regression models by November 17th, when I'll have the results that I will be presenting in the final paper. The expected findings hopefully are agility improves resilience and export performance, and resilience partially mediates the relationship. When it comes to the timeline, now in November is the proposal presentation, as well as the paper I will be submitting on Monday, I'm sorry. November comes the data analysis and the results, and in December, the final submission. When it comes to implications, I gathered two types, the theoretical and the practical. For the theoretical implications, it extends to the resource-based view and the dynamic capabilities framework by integrating resilience as a mediating capability. I hope to contribute new Latin American evidence to the agility and export literature. And for practical implications, SMEs should invest in innovation and digital processes to strengthen agility. Policymakers should improve logistics and customs efficiency to enhance resilience and exports. For the journals, the conferences, and the reviewers, I've selected two journals for publication that I plan to target. One is the Journal of International Management, which has a strong focus on dynamic capabilities. And the second one is the Journal of Small Business Management. It has an SME and export orientation. For the potential conferences, I'd like to apply for the Academy of International Business, which the abstract is due on February 26, I'm sorry, and the LACEA Annual Conference of Latin America Economics, which the abstract is due on March 2026. For possible reviewers, I would try to source Professor Álvaro Cuervo Casura, he's from Northeastern University. Dr. Ride Shams, he's from Northumbria University. And Dr. Rodríguez González from La Universidad de Castilla-La Mancha. To conclude, I expect to confirm that organizational agility and supply chain resilience jointly enhance export performances. This research contributes theoretical depth to the dynamic capabilities field and offers practical insight for Latin America. SMEs seeking export growth under international constraints and be able to fill the gap, which I stated that was pretty clear when it comes to all three variables compared together. Thank you very much for your time. Please, I thank your comments.
Thank you so much, Karjit. Yes, Alexandra's commending you. Great. Can you, okay, I'm going to tell all of you to put page numbers on your slides because I have trouble referencing where I want you to go without the page numbers.
Okay.
So make sure I don't think anybody had page numbers. So make sure you put page numbers on your slides. Go back to the operationalization slide. I think you were the only one who did that for me. Maybe George did too. But like, look at that. That's what I want from you guys. Okay. I want you to describe how you are going to use your variable, which variable is going to be your proxy for your construct. Exactly, that's what I want. And then the next slide, please. And then the models here, very nicely done. I'll say more about that later next week. This is great. And I think you have everything. I think he did everything I wanted him to do. Back to the last slide with the journal and the conferences. Yeah, this is fine. Maybe you can tell me where those conferences are going to be to entice, the others to start searching. And then also, I guess what country those universities are in would help too. But and
I would
maybe
ask them for the next one for the
maybe
presentation.
an email address for those reviewers. Okay, so that's kind of what I
Okay.
want. So he's almost, this is like 80% of what I want. I want him to add so you guys have to do that too, all right? That's what I want. It fits on one slide. If you can use a bigger font, I'm trying to think of a standard font size. I don't know. But you should just have like two fonts in your presentations. Sorry, two font sizes in your presentation, the same font, which you guys are all complying with using the same font, but the size should be larger to fit on a page, and maybe you can stagger them to do that. But anyway, you did great, 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 great.
Thank you.
Alexandra, please comment. I will leave it to you. I hope I didn't take any of your comments.
No, I wanted to say it was really full and well structured. Obviously, we've gone back and forth with our presentations a few times. I only really have one thing here to maybe improve for the next submission, and the literature review is really strong. But I think maybe if you didn't limit yourself to Latin America just for like um, to make a contrast between what you can find in different countries versus what you found in Peru and Latin America, it could maybe give you a new perspective on your topic and research.
Excellent. I'll be doing that as well. Now for the paper, I'll sit down with Alexandra and we'll see those how I can integrate that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Harjeet. That was great.
Thank you.
So working together, in general, you guys tell me, is it helping you? You're not alone, right? The idea is you're not alone.
No, we're not alone. We've spoken and we've chatted. We've met several times to be able to have a clear understanding of where we want to be, as well as we both integrated ideas to each other's presentations. I integrated parts of Alexandra's presentation, and Alexandra integrated parts of my presentation to be able to have a complete view of what we wanted both and have somewhat the same or similar uh, be able to have similar presentations when it comes to context and what the depth of what we're trying to go to. That's why Alexandra and my presentation tried to be aligned in almost every slide. That way we had a lot of the same things and we can be together when it comes to researching and writing. We have a very clear
Wow.
and very similar view on how we write. And literature review was a very big step for us because we found a lot of stuff that was similar. That's why Alexandra's and I dynamic capabilities was aligned, and that was part of my critique.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And you're not in isolation. You're developing at the same pace. You can pass things, you can share, yeah, sources. You can share understanding of variables, operationalization. Yeah, no, it's great. I think this is more than what I expected actually. So I really appreciate you've taken that extra step to be collaborative and developing expertise together so that you guys can really grow together. So that's really great. You guys, yeah, I really appreciate what you've done.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. So we are at 8:30. So I'm gonna let you choose if we're gonna have the last two to present tonight. I will be here for that. Or if you want to present next week, ladies, Katiria and Anna Lord. Would you like to do it today because you prepare for today, or do you want to wait for Monday? You're ready to do today?
Kathy, Ana, lo que tú crees. ¿Me escuchas?
The
Sí.
advantage of
Yes.
doing it now, we're probably going to go past the time by 9, but I'll be here, and the others, if they have to go, they can go. But I expect
Dale, pues.
everyone should be here till at least 10 till 9. And the advantage is you're going to hear my critique, and then you can fix it as opposed to waiting. So
I prefer that.
Dale.
okay, so let's do that. And I hope the others can stay because they sat through yours. So if you could stay, I appreciate it. But we are going to go past 9 o'clock. So let's see. Whoever like to go first, I'm in anticipation here.
I may go first.
Okay, great.
Okay. Let me share my. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So, hi everyone, my name is Hannah Valentin Fortunet, and I'm gonna be presenting you my proposal for the research paper, which is on the impact of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act enforcement on foreign direct investments in emerging markets. As an introduction, I would like to give you a few some information. Sorry. The FCPA promotes transparency and deters bribery. Its extraterritorial enforcement has shaped global business conduct. And emerging markets are especially affected due to weaker institutions. As a statement of the problem, I would like to share with you, that the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of 1977 represents one of the most influential pieces of extraterritorial anti-corruption legislation, shaping how multinational enterprises conduct business abroad. While intended to deter bribery and promote transparency, the aggressive enforcement of the FCPA has raised questions about its broader economic implications, particularly for investment in emerging markets where corruption risk remain high and institutional environments are weaker. Recent research suggests that the increased extraterritorial reach of the FCPA during the mid-2000s significantly altered global investment patterns, reducing foreign direct investment to high corruption risk countries. However, the extent to which enforcement of the FCPA deters corruption versus discourages legitimate investment remains unclear. This tension between ethical compliance and economic participation constitutes a critical policy and managerial dilemma for both regulators and multinational corporations. I would like to add that the FCPA has been put on a halt by the President Trump's administration during the summer. So it's tricky what they might be doing with without this act put on place right now. The purpose of the study is analyze how FCPA enforcement impacts the FDI decisions of multinational enterprises in emerging markets. And the study seeks to empirically and theoretically assess whether stricter enforcement discourages investment due to increased compliance costs and perceived legal exposure. the research questions. The main question is, how does enforcement of the FCPA affect the FDI in emerging markets? But the sub questions are, does enforcement reduce FDI in corrupt countries? Are US and non-US firms affected differently? And does host country governance moderate this effect? I have three hypotheses. Because I don't see the first one here. Okay. Increased FCPA enforcement is negatively associated with FDI inflows to countries with high perceived corruption. The hypothesis two is the deterrent effect of FCPA enforcement is stronger for non-US multinationals subject to extraterritorial jurisdiction. And the third one is a stronger host country governance mitigates the negative impact of FCPA enforcement on FDI inflows. The theoretical framework. Institutional theory, firms adapt to global norms and legitimacy pressures. The deterrence theory is that enforcement increases compliance cost and risk aversion. The conceptual model is that the FCPA enforcement lowers the FDI inflows. And institutional quality and corruption level has a moderate effect. Limitations of the study is that the research will focus primarily on emerging markets using available cross-national data on FDI, FCPA enforcement actions, and corruption perception indexes. And the limitations might arise from the availability and consistency of enforcement data, particularly regarding to non-US firms. The causal inference challenges given potential endogeneity between FCPA enforcement intensity and global economic cycle. And the measurement bias in perception-based corruption indices, for example, the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index. I have some definitions and terms about the FCPA that I told you before, that prohibiting bribery of foreign officials and requiring accurate accounting records, the extraterritorial enforcement, which is application of domestic laws to foreign firms or activities outside national boundaries, the foreign direct investment, long-term investment by a firm in a foreign enterprise to obtain controlling interest for influence. The emerging markets, economies characterized by rapid growth potential, but weaker institutional and regulatory frameworks. And the corruption perception index that Transparency International measure in the public sector. The so what factor, why is this important? Demonstrates how anti-corruption enforcement shapes global investment behavior, highlights the balance between ethical governance and economic competitiveness, offers insights for policymakers and multinationals to promote integrity without discouraging investment, and it strengthens understanding of how law, ethics, and business strategy interact in emerging markets. I put here some of the literature review by themes. Enforcement and foreign direct investment. The enforcement reduces FDI in corrupt countries by Christensen et al. Corporation social responsibility and adaptation, firms shift to CSR, community spending, also by Christensen et al. Institutional effects, governance, moderates corruption, FDI link, legitimacy and norms, private perception varies by culture, and governance evolution, firms influence reforms. Methodology, I'm still working on this, but it's a sample emerging markets from 2000 to 2024. The data sources come from the Department of Justice, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Stanford FCPA Clearinghouse, the United Nations, World Bank, and International Monetary Fund. The key variables, the CPA enforcement, the dependent FDI inflows, moderators might be corruption and governance, and the controls, the GDP, the openness, and the political stability. Here are some of the data sources that I have identified, like I mentioned before. Expected results, higher enforcement, lower FDI in corrupt countries. A stronger governance means weaker negative impact. I'm still working on this. Maybe the journal that I identified is the Journal of International Business Studies, and the conference, the ACI's annual conference on FCBA and global anti-corruption. Still haven't identified possible reviewers. These are my references. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ana Laura. I'll make some brief comments before I turn to Kateria. Just that your backgrounds on your slides, you can make them a little bit like lighter, maybe a little more watermark, so that they don't block what you're trying to say. And on page 7, you mentioned the theories, and in general, I like you guys. I like her font. I like her presentation. Nice, simple. You know, not too many words. Too many words is your paper's going to be full of words. This is where you have a chance to, like she's done here, is just highlight and then show the flow of the paper and the main themes. And I really appreciate how she's done it here. But yeah, you need to put there your references, like at least the author and the years, because yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't know where you got those from. And then at the end you disappoint with your font, but it's okay. The reference font, you got to go back to the so pick 2 sizes, you know, work with 2 sizes, your title size and then your text size. And maybe you can make your picture smaller. So that then you have more room for the thing. So anyway, that was just that discussion. I think I like it. I think I didn't see your models though. I don't really see your models. And
Still working.
variables. You're working on it, I know. So just I want to see your control variables, and control variables again are variables that in your model will affect both, are behind both your independent and your dependent variable, and they're actually responsible for what's, you know, what's influencing the relationship, not the independent variable itself. So you have to think about what are those variables. And again, you're going to get that from the other papers that you've read, right? Or from the papers you've read. All right. So I'm going to let Kateria, who's thought about it more than me, comment, and then we'll turn to her. But thank you, Ana Laura. You did great.
Sí, que vi, son varios asuntos de investigación que están dentro del mismo, de la presentación, porque se pueden extraer, está muy rico, está muy bueno, sobre todo el que le gusta la línea del fraude. Y algo que cuando tuve la oportunidad de conversar con Hannelore hace unas semanas atrás, le dije, vamos a limitarlo, vamos a concentrarnos para que ese tema esté un poquito, vamos a redefinirlo, esté bien enfocado, esté bien sólido. De igual manera, el gap. Vamos a, dentro de la literatura, que se identifique ese gap para que fortalezca pues lo que se está estudiando, el problema, y de igual forma la base de datos y el área que quieres identificar dentro de la corrupción. De igual manera, ella me dejó saber que quería insertar lo que es el FCPA a las multinacionales, pero también a las economías emergentes. Trajo a colación y hablamos también un poco de los country host, que entonces de aquí cómo entonces lo iba a unir a esa economía emergente y lo mismo de cómo si iba a ser un outsourcing o era que era de un country host. Ver cómo lo iba a ir trabajando para fortalecer ese modelo y ese estudio tan único que está realizando. Lo vi en el proceso, lo vi mucho más. Lo ha ido poco a poco, lo ha ido redefiniendo y va a ser muy, muy bueno. Así que muy bien, gracias, Hannelore.
Gracias, Katiria.
Creo que ahí se ve algo. No tengo mis dudas, se ve.
Todavía. Ahora sí.
Ah, sí. Bueno. La presentación de mi propuesta, es bastante sencilla porque tengo que darle la oportunidad basada en el curso y a ir desarrollándola, a ir redefiniéndola para que se identifique ese desarrollo acorde, ¿verdad?, a los diferentes cursos que vamos a ir tomando en el programa doctoral en que nos encontramos. Por tanto, mi nombre es Katiria Troche y mi tema es la relación entre la innovación y el rendimiento financiero de empresas multinacionales con segmentos de máquinas y derivados de café. Antes de entrar a la introducción, encontré meritorio una pequeña reflexión sobre por qué el mercado del café. En un curso pasado les dejé saber de que a veces cuando hablamos de innovación no lo podemos relacionar al mercado del café porque vemos a la innovación como algo muy demasiado moderno, tecnológico, y el mercado de café como que un poquito aburrido, no es tan atractivo. Y entonces, dentro de las noticias y las diferentes asociaciones del café nos indican que el café no tan solo alimenta nuestra vida cotidiana, sino que es un poderoso motor para el empleo, las comunidades y la economía en los Estados Unidos, al tiempo que sostiene los medios de vida de los caficultores en Hawái, Puerto Rico y en todo el mundo. Una cita del año 2023 de la Asociación Nacional del Café en los Estados Unidos, que es meritorio estudiar dentro de la disciplina de administración de empresas, sobre todo en comercio internacional, ya que sobre todo en los Estados Unidos aproximadamente 2,3 millones de tazas de café son consumidas cada minuto, siendo el café por volumen de ventas la cuarta bebida más consumida del mundo. Eso fueron expresiones en un artículo de Wallace en el 2020. Les puedo adelantar que es la bebida número uno en los Estados Unidos, un 77% de igual forma en el año 2022. Vamos a pasar a la introducción. En nuestra introducción, la rentabilidad del sector del café y su potencial crecimiento han dado lugar a importantes inversiones financieras por compañías públicas que cotizan en el mercado bursátil de los Estados Unidos de América. Sarge, World Rising, Toledo y Mellon en el año 2019 realizaron un informe para el Columbia Center Sustainable Investment, y entre las estimaciones del Operating Profit Margin se encontró un 15% para Starbucks y de un 17% para Keurig Dr. Pepper, donde sugieren que las grandes empresas cafeteras de los Estados Unidos están obteniendo muy buen rendimiento financiero. También exponen el aspecto lucrativo del café, como el poder de las marcas y un valor agregado por los países importadores. Todo relacionado a aspectos intangibles que incluyen a la innovación, la imagen de la marca y el entorno general del producto. El problema. ¿Cuál es el problema de la investigación que estamos llevando en curso? La innovación se ha convertido en el corazón de las empresas de éxito y en un motor clave del crecimiento económico para la medición de la innovación. Pero la medición de la innovación es un asunto difuso, y ya que la innovación es un concepto amplio que tiene muchas dimensiones, lo que hace difícil tener una imagen clara de cómo podría medirse con el reconocimiento de todos los aspectos, más bien únicos. No existe, no lo va a encontrar. Eh, Shorten me establece que es el padre se reconoce como el padre de la innovación basado en sus escritos desde el 1919. eh, Me reconoce varias dimensiones de la innovación. Entre ellas podemos reconocer un nuevo producto. En conversaciones podemos identificar, cuando sacan un nuevo producto en conversaciones, el método para realizar el producto e incluso la creatividad con la que tú lo realizas, como cuando hablamos de Starbucks, las mezclas, o la tecnología, diferentes dimensiones cuando hablamos del concepto de innovación. Por eso este estudio se hace tan rico, adquiere un valor agregado al concentrarnos en solamente una dimensión de la innovación, que sería un nuevo producto, y el único relacionado al mercado, que involucra al mercado del café, ya reconociendo entre las lagunas que se identifica en todos los diferentes estudios que he tenido la oportunidad de
Donna,
revisar.
Katiria, puede poner la presentación en full screen porque es difícil verlo.
Sí.
Sí, porque mis ojos, a esa hora no,
Ah,
no lo veo bien.
no.
No. Si puede,
Se ve el del presentador, no el de full
Ah,
screen.
¿qué se ve qué?
El del presentador, donde sale chido y el próximo slide y tus notas.
perdona la
Que
interrupción.
se ve las notas.
Te voy a enviar una foto.
¿Cómo?
Te voy a enviar una foto.
Vale, vale. Porque a mí me sale como que está.
Qué bonito.
Ok,
Ya se envió.
ok. Vamos a ver qué pasó aquí. No sé qué pasó, pero vamos, porque está bien, ¿verdad? Antes sí, aquí. Porque como estoy utilizando varios monitores, se me fue.
Yo creo que fue lo mismo que me pasó a mí.
Sí, sí, sí. Esto aquí no me permite. No sé si.
Te veo.
La innovación. Ay, no
Fue,
sé,
fue, ok, con la
no me está.
cámara, toca la cámara, no sé. Oh, no, ese tú. Ok, no, el otro, entonces. No la cámara, pero al lado, hay
No,
una,
y el
un
share,
screen, creo, una pantalla. Al lado de la cámara, en los opciones,
el layout, fueron las que me mostró de background, content only, or shoulders side by side. Anotaciones, more.
Si no puede, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's okay.
Está raro, no sé, nada, de igual forma lo envío. Pues nada, entre las lagunas que identificamos por decir en todos, no puedo decir todo, vamos a ver, en la mayoría de los estudios que he tenido la oportunidad de revisar, se identifica que entre las lagunas existentes sobre la innovación en las empresas es que no hay un consenso claro sobre cuáles son las dimensiones y los indicadores claves de rendimiento que se deben de medir y no existe una solución única. Y de igual, ¿por qué? Porque si me seleccionas una innovación del producto, una innovación cuando hablamos de la maquinaria que utilizaste, hasta incluso en el personal, recursos humanos, y por tanto cambian las variables, cambian también si utilizas la innovación como una variable independiente, de igual forma, la dependiente se adapta a la cultura. Si estamos hablando de empresas multinacionales, ya sabemos que son firmas, que son de mayor escala, mientras que si hablamos de pymes, es mucho menor. eh, Tanto cuántas personas tienes empleadas, como cuánto es tu gasto, cuánto tú produces, cuánto tú exportas. Y entonces ahí es que se encuentra ese desafío y ese gap. En este caso nos vamos a enfocar en lo que son las empresas multinacionales. La mayoría de los estudios que se han realizado han sido en pymes y han utilizado lo que son cuestionarios que ya también había hecho mención en una clase pasada. Ok, la pregunta general en la cual se dirige el estudio es cómo logramos medir los efectos de la innovación al rendimiento financiero de una empresa multinacional con líneas de café. Como dato curioso, quise también hacer mención de que los Estados Unidos como país es sede de empresas líderes a nivel mundial, tanto como Apple, Microsoft, Starbucks, Google, Facebook, Amazon e innumerables empresas más que son ejemplo de innovación en sus modelos de negocio y que han tenido éxito. Ahí podemos reconocer automáticamente Starbucks como empresa pues, dentro del mercado del café. Cabe señalar que los Estados Unidos también ha logrado grandes avances dentro de la industria del café. A modo de ejemplo, la compañía Starbucks como uno de los modelos de negocio innovadores más exitosos a nivel global. Sí. Dentro de la revisión de literatura, quise traer a la colación dos sencillas, pero muy ricas, entre ellas un estudio de Goffin y y Mitchell, ambos con vasta experiencia en el desarrollo e investigación de nuevos productos a través de la innovación. Nos detalla los KPI relacionados al rendimiento de la innovación dentro de una empresa y nos brinda pues varias medidas financieras que así lo demuestran, ya que como estamos en los comienzos, estamos en este proceso del curso de ADMI 6715, vamos a identificar bien esas variables, esa variable dependiente y esa variable dependiente que sería el rendimiento financiero y cuáles de ellas, qué métricas en particular yo necesito, cuáles variables necesito dentro para reconocer ese rendimiento financiero. Y qué mejor que estudios que me identifican esos KPI. Ahora, tengo otro que fue realizado en del país checo. Estos dos autores investigaron si las empresas que invierten en innovación obtienen un mejor rendimiento financiero y si son más capaces de responder a una crisis económica. Para la obtención de los resultados y validar la hipótesis de si las innovaciones mejoran la capacidad de una empresa para hacer frente a una crisis económica, se realizó la aplicación no paramétrica de la prueba Human-Whitney sobre los datos recopilados de una muestra de empresas para el periodo de los años 2007 al 2014 y mostró que el rendimiento financiero a largo plazo está estrechamente vinculado a su inversión en la innovación. a corto plazo, a largo plazo. Objetivos, el objetivo principal. Desarrollar o adoptar métricas de innovación concretas y definirse en qué constituye el potencial de innovación para identificar cuál es la intención estratégica de las actividades de innovación dentro de esa compañía, ya que puede variar de una organización a otra. Nos enfocaremos en la dimensión de la innovación de un nuevo producto y examinar cuáles son las variables que influyen al rendimiento financiero dentro de una empresa. Entre otros objetivos, relacionar un producto con el valor de la empresa. Hipótesis, la que nos va a marcar la principal, la que vamos a poner a prueba. Entre más innovadora es una empresa, mayor es su rendimiento financiero. Vamos a ver si es nula en el proceso. Metodología. Vamos a ir. Identificamos la variable dependiente y la variable independiente. Variable dependiente, innovación. ¿En qué dimensión? Nuevo producto. ¿Cómo identificamos esa variable dependiente? Pues con el gasto en Research and Development, patentes y la introducción de un nuevo producto. Variable independiente, rendimiento financiero, financial performance, como con Return on Assets, ROE y ventas del producto. Será un estudio mixto, ya que se estarán describiendo teorías relacionadas a la innovación, las diferentes dimensiones, con mayor profundidad y detalle, y el surgimiento de cada una de ellas, pues, y trayendo cada tiempo productos de las compañías seleccionadas de la muestra, y se aplicarán regresiones para probar relación entre variables de existir y modelos que aporten a identificar los objetivos. El marco teórico se concentra en la teoría de innovación de Schumpeter del 1919. Diseño aplicado para este curso. Pues para propósitos del curso de ADMI 6715 se estará seleccionando las siguientes empresas multinacionales que cotizan en la Bolsa de Valores de los Estados Unidos, ya que pues, es información pública y es accesible. La compañía Keurig, con sede en los Estados Unidos, y a Nestlé con Nespresso. Ambos, Keurig versus Nespresso, que son reconocidos por estas máquinas innovadoras de café, tanto de una sola taza como los K-Cup, que están en competencia en la actualidad. Periodo de años, pues estamos en el proceso de identificar algo que sea factible, si lo hacemos de 5 a 7 años. Que sería ese periodo para la fase 2 para obtener los informes financieros de ellas. De igual forma, las formas 10K presentadas por las empresas al SEC durante el periodo de tiempo seleccionado, previamente identificado, a través de la base de datos de Compustat. La fase 3, una vez que identifique eso, tabular los datos encontrados, realizar regresiones lineales o de panel para probar si existe relación entre la innovación y el rendimiento financiero. Fase 4, realizar análisis y mostrar resultados. Perdón, aquí me quedé. Son las 9, perdón, me paso un poquito. Profesora, ya tenemos, por lo menos de mi parte, cómo vamos trabajando con el tema seleccionado de investigación y la pregunta.
Gracias, Katiria. Solamente unos comentarios antes de que Anelor te critica. For the presentation, necesitamos un uniforme reglas para todos. The body of the presentation should be like 24-point font. And the headings can be 32-point font. And if it doesn't fit, you have to shorten what you have on the slide. What you have there is like the material for your paper. That's not what I need here. I need the summary here in the presentation. Pero anyway, everybody can benefit from the guideline that you have a 24 point font in the presentation body and 32 point in the headings. And ¿me entienden? And um and you have it in Spanish. I think it's okay, but this is international business and it should be in English. You can present in Spanish, and I appreciate you put the translator there, which is great for me. It was so small. I was trying to read. It was so small for me because the presentation was too small. But anyway, we'll work on the presentation of the slide. What is this, PowerPoint or something else, Katiria? Es
PowerPoint.
Ok, no sé por
Es
qué.
PowerPoint y lo hice adaptado lo más sencillo posible, pero claro, tengo todo el material para mucho más elaborado y aún más
Sí,
específico
sí,
y con
sí, sí,
todas las
sí,
referencias aplicadas.
You can shorten it. Puedes, anyway, está todo, está aquí, pero tiene que, ajá, make it shorter. Highlight keywords and highlights and anyway. So, and yeah, there's some things missing here, pero you can fix it, right, for the deadline. Um, and I'm gonna pass to Anna Laura, I think, for that. So can you translate it in English for Friday or Monday for Monday? If I make this
Yo,
due,
claro, sí.
but you have to fix it. You have to make it shorter. Not too much content on the slides, just the main points. And then and you can continue to present in Spanish. It doesn't matter to me, but just I would like it in English just for that's how we do it. Lo hacemos así, inglés en la pantalla, pero habla su idioma.
Perfecto, es que lo sentí como que siempre todo lo he hecho en inglés, pero vi acorde que, ¿verdad? Traerla en español por lo mismo, por como lo estoy expresando, pero es hasta más cómodo porque la mayoría de los términos y los conceptos son en inglés.
Exacto. Okay. So, okay, voy a pasar por Anador and then we can go. Thank you, Anador. Thank you, Katiria.
Um, just, bueno, vamos a mantenerlo en español. Me pareció excelente, Katiria, sobre todo que lo tienes bien delimitado a, a dos compañías, una de Estados Unidos y otra con base en Suiza, que me parece pues que entonces ahí le da el ámbito de international business al trabajo. En términos generales me pareció muy bien. Profesora, quería hacer una pregunta. I wanted to ask you something. Uh, for Monday or Friday, do you want the PowerPoint or the proposal paper? Because I was working. You're on mute.
Professor, you're
Ambos,
muted.
ambos.
Okay, both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sí. Yo
Because
creo que
I see you need more time.
Sí, yo creo que ya al ser la empresa multinacional de por sí ya es comercio internacional,
Sí.
pero quise traer lo de United States versus Suiza, porque siempre llama un poquito la atención traerlo a la actualidad de esto que se está generando un poquito y el aspecto también la teoría de la competitividad y dentro de lo mismo, la misma línea. Tenemos las máquinas de Nespresso y las máquinas de Keurig y vamos a examinar las ventas y vamos a ver cómo es lo mismo, cómo está cada una de las compañías. Ya les adelanto que yo sé que Keurig es la número uno en ventas dentro de los Estados Unidos, pero vamos a ver un poquito más, vamos a indagar qué está pasando y dentro de cada una de las líneas.
Okay, any other comments, any other questions? Thank you, Katiria and Alor. All right, so thank you for staying. I will post the upload links with the instructions so you can edit, modify, improve your presentations. And this is a good draft for your final presentation. So that's the idea that we're building to the end, right? So keep working and you'll see those. I should have those tomorrow. You should see those upload links for both the draft paper and for the presentation, okay? And keep me posted if you need to meet with me. If you have any questions, please contact me. You can email me or you can text me in WhatsApp or regular text and we can meet. All right. So have a good night. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Buenas noches, bye.
Okay.